Okay, I'm going to take you through some of the character creation process for Fortune's Wheel using the Golden Tarot of the Renaissance deck by Lo Scaribo. It's actually a pretty good deck to use for this because it's a traditional 78 card deck and it's lavishly illustrated and it's got a nice medieval theme. I quite like that for the game, to be honest. Right. The first card that I'm going to draw, I'm going to lay out on these on the Fortune's Wheel spread, which is basically just the 4 cardinal points of the compass. The first card I'm laying out north. This is actually where the element of fire would reside on the wheel. You'll see that on the character sheet layouts as well, which is quite a helpful guide for you. And also on the correspondence chart that we've got for the elements and the wheel itself. This card in the fire element is the 7 of chalices, as they call it on this deck, or cups. That one is going to be in the fire element, so this is to do with the character's willpower, creativity, and general sort of creative energy. As a 7, considering that for people it goes up to 10 for a character, that's actually pretty strong. What we can then do, you can look either in a little booklet. These are the sort that come in the packs, or if you've got a book on tarot, you can use that. Over time you do get kind of used to the meanings as well, by the way, and you can just get a little interpretation in here. So you'd look inside, there's a set of instructions as to what the traditional meanings might be. Don't feel bound by these though, they're just a guide. If you get something from the card that you think is interesting, perhaps you're inspired by the little sort of moon symbol with the cups around it, or the relationship between the characters, or something like that, don't be afraid to use that as well, and just go with your gut feelings. This particular one, it's orientated so that it's the right way up. That's what we call a day card in Fortune's Wheel, which means that you take the standard meaning for it, which for the 7 of Cups is actually creativity, discovery and supernatural vision, according to this particular booklet. That's actually quite interesting to see in the fire element, because the fire element is all about things like creativity, so it does suggest that there's a sort of a reinforcing strength to that. But it's a water card. Cups is to do with the opposite element, which would be down here for water. So there does have a sort of suggestion of a conflict as well in there of some sort. Worth bearing in mind. Anyway, we can then move on to the next card, which we place for Earth. Now, this one I've got the Judgment card. It's inverted or upside down, what we call a Knight card. When you get a card that's not one of the numbered pip cards of the Minor Arcana, you keep it and you draw again. This is because we're not using the higher values of these cards. We're just keeping the card for its meaning, essentially. So we draw an X card, and we've got the Knave of Swords. Now, the Knave of Swords as a court card, again, we keep it here for the meaning. Again, it's inverted or a Knight card, and we draw again. And here we now get the World. So we're in a little bit of a run here of cards that we're just using for meaning, which suggests there's a lot of backstory to do with this character's Earth element. Earth being to do with practical everyday things, the physical body, your material well-being, and so on. So we draw again. Now, this time we've got the One of Swords in its day orientation right way up. So we'd stop there on this element. You can have a look and see what the backstory is, but immediately we can see here that he or she, this character, has a very, very low score numerically, very low power in their Earth. Now, that's suggesting that there's something that's meaning that they're very weak or disadvantaged in some way. For practical use, that could just mean that they're very weak and sickly or something like that. Looking back at the cards, if we look at Judgment as an inverted card, it's got to do with doubt, regret and illness. So that knight meaning of the card is really strongly suggesting that this idea that the characters had some kind of health issue in the past is a good track to go down. The next card on there, the Knave of Swords, that one is very much to do in its inverted form with incompetence, bad news, gossip, that kind of thing. It's again not a good card. You can use that as maybe relating into this card with illness, something to do with bad news of illness. Perfectly possible. Now, the World, that one, it's the right way up. It's a much more positive card that we've got there. You could actually see that as perfection, success, or some kind of inheritance or coming together of things. This is suggesting that the material circumstances of the character have actually improved in some way. There's some kind of security or completion that's happened here, perhaps to do with this news that you see in the past. Now, the final card, the One of Swords, we can have a look at that as well, see what the One of Swords is all about. That one is dynamism, triumph after a bitter struggle. So there's a suggestion there that they really have overcome a lot of the problems. Perhaps they're content or managing now with their issues of health or something like that, and things have stabilised. Okay, so we'll move on to the next card. This is for the element of water. And what we have here, we've got the Fool. Now, we can't use that card for anything other than a meaning. Again, it's Major Arcana, so we draw again. And this time we get the 5 of coins or pentacles. Now, that one we can use. It's suggesting that they're about average in water, which is to do with sort of emotional life and social things. So they're average on that. This background of the Fool in the day orientation, that really suggests that there's some sort of background of carefreeness, childhood, naivety, something like that. So perhaps they've been fairly isolated socially, which actually fits quite well with this sense of them having had some kind of illness. Perhaps they've been cloistered away. With the 5 of Pentacles, 5 of coins, that one is to do with material worries and a lack of means. It does suggest that emotionally there is still some worry in their life. Perhaps they have concerns about their well-being because of their health. Let's move on to our final one, Air. This one we've got here, this is the Knight of Pentacles upside down, Knight card. Let's pop that one there. We've got to move on. And we get the Hierophant, again, in its Knight orientation, so we move on from that. And here we now have the 10 of Swords. That's actually a very nice card to draw for this. That's as high a strength for this element as you can get, suggesting this character is a bit of an intellectual powerhouse. Air is to do with knowledge, the intellect, and your wits. So this is a very, very intellectually gifted person. They may not be brilliantly educated, though. Education tends to come in more from your material circumstances. So, looking at the cards, the Knight of Pentacles inverted. Let's have a look and see what that means. The Knight of Pentacles inverted has got to do with a figurehead, a dishonest professional. Makes me wonder, perhaps a tutor, somebody who's been brought in to help this sickly and cloistered away person. The next card, the Hierophant, well, that's actually very much to do with religious things or instruction, that sort of thing, tradition. But inverted, it actually ends up being about resentment and intolerance. And it suggests somebody perhaps immoral is an influence here. And this could be this tutor. Maybe they've had somebody in their life who's a tutor, who's educated them, been an inspiration to them, who's actually quite deceptive and unreliable in some way. Coming onto the card itself, the 10 of Swords. As I said, that one is a very, very powerful card. And again, swords, this is in its element. Swords is the air element. It's a very, very powerful one to get there. That's actually to do with resolutions of problems and of difficulties. And it suggests to me that this is somebody who solves their problems using their intellect. So here you can see we have got a picture already forming of a character. We know how physically capable they are, how emotionally skillful they are, how intellectual they are, and what their willpower and creativity is generally like. We've got numerical values for those, very much like you'd get rolling dice. But you've also got all of this layer of character background. And that also starts to suggest things that are important in their life, perhaps a future story involving this character. They might be very concerned about their health and their worries, their material worries and emotional worries about these things, and want to move on from that and gain some kind of security. Perhaps they're getting involved in whatever story you're telling on that basis, that they're seeking to improve their situation. It might also involve some kind of story with perhaps this tutor figure coming into play. You know, maybe they actually have played a role in this person's life which they're now starting to become a little bit more aware of as a problem. Maybe there's some conflict that will come out in the story where they discover the unreliability and deceptiveness of this influential figure in their lives. You can play around with these. You could, if you wanted to, decide to move them round, just changing the positions, just moving them around the wheel. If you didn't want to play a very weak character, if you wanted to be very physical and capable materially, you could move it all the way around. So, for example, your strongest card ends up there. And of course all of the others would move around as well with it, and that would change the relationships of the cards. It would change the way that they work from the point of view of the card in each element, and it would change the way that you're telling this story, because obviously this background where we were talking about illness was very much based on the idea this was a physical side. If this was somewhere else, say in intellect, it might have far more to do with problems mentally. I mean, why this character would be so dim, because that's the price that you would pay on that. There is another way that you can improve the character if you really wanted to move past this terribly low score. You can take points from your character's fortune score. Fortune points are used to accomplish a variety of things in the game. You'll gain and lose them based on successes and failures, and the pool that you build up, which can only go up to a maximum of 100 points usually, is something that you'd actually use to accomplish a lot of tasks. If, for example, you get injured, you can use it to heal yourself up, to effectively absorb the wound so that you don't get damaged by it. And you can also use it to cast magic in the game, if you're using magic in your system with this, in your actual game world. And it can be used for doing what we call enchanting the narrative, which is basically making things go the way you want in the story, changing the cards that you draw. Now, in this instance, if you were to use fortune to improve this, you could improve it to, say, 2, by taking 10 points off your permanent maximum fortune. So instead of having 100 points that you could get up to, you'd only have 90. And you can do that each point that you're increasing the card value for would actually take off some of that maximum, 10 points each time. So there is a price to pay for doing that. You get your character initially a little bit more capable in somewhere where you're weak, but it seriously limits your future potential with that character's fortune. So it's worth bearing in mind and being a little bit careful with it. There is another thing that you can do where you balance off the aspects of the element itself. With the physical side of things, you might decide that your character, you're quite happy for them to be weak, but you'd rather that they were actually very agile. And what you could do is you could try and say, well, I'm going to put a point on for 1 and take a point off for the other, and then you just note when you're actually playing that that character has this particular strength or weakness in that area. With a score of 1, you're not going to be able to do that, so really it's only the 2 previous choices that you'd have. We're going to keep it like this. We're going to run with the character here that we've got. Now, another thing that you can do is you can also do a tarot spread to find out a little bit more, get a sense of perhaps what their future direction would be, and maybe a little bit more detail about their past. The easiest and quickest one to do with that is just a simple 3-card spread. I'll just do one for that now. With these spreads, it doesn't actually matter what the cards are from the point of view of drawing them. You can just use whichever come up. Just move that a little there. Okay, so generally in 3-card spread, you've got past, present and future. You can play around with that. You can set other things for it. But what we've got here in the past is the Sun. Now, that card effectively... just looking at the rather delightful picture of the woman, I think it looks like she's spinning something. That looks like it's an old spinning, weaving staff. Could be wrong on that, but it's going to very much be, in this instance, tied in with the past that we've already got for them. It's to do with friendship, joy, honour, love, that sort of thing. It's a positive, bright, sunny card, as the name suggests, which kind of runs against this picture of somebody cloistered away through illness. But then again, maybe they were just happy that way. There was something about their childhood that they really loved. Moving on to the card here, the 8 of Wands, inverted or Knight card. That particular one is to do with unachievable goals. So it does suggest that there is some sense, tying in with this idea of worries, that there is an unachievable goal at the moment, some blockage or frustration in the character's life that might be what is leading them into the story. The final card here, the 7 of Wands, again inverted. That one is to do with betrayals and trust problems. So we do seem to come back to this figure here. I think we're seeing a story potentially evolving here where this character, who's been so influential in the main character's life, is going to possibly be some kind of major antagonist for them. Now, you might have plans for a general story that doesn't focus on that's covering something else that you've created. But with this, you can always fit this character in. There's nothing wrong with having side plots. They happen quite a lot in stories, so that can actually add a bit of richness, interest, and a little bit of a surprise element to the game, perhaps, when this character comes in. This particular spread is going to be one that you'd use an awful lot, with or without the extra cards. You can, instead of using these cards, the 3-card spread, use other ones like a Celtic Cross or whatever else you wished, or even a repetition of the Fortune's Wheel spread. But the Fortune's Wheel spread is the core of the game. Essentially, you can use this to create anything. We've created a character with it, but you could do it to create a weapon, a creature, some terrible monster, the setting itself, a world, or even map out a basic story plot with it. This is what you're going to mostly use whenever you are trying to create something significant within the game. It's usually something that you'd use in a preparation stage. When you're actually playing, you probably don't want to be messing about with laying the cards out all the time like this, and certainly not for absolutely everything. So, in general, most of the time in play, you'll actually be describing things like this, but with a single card. So if you've got a creature, you want to know what its physical abilities are, you just draw a card, you get on this one that it's the Queen of Wands. You could either work on it and say, well, I'm going to give it a maximum of 10 and just draw again and use this as background, or you could actually say this is a tough creature and assign it the value of 13, which is what the card would normally be. And that would be quite a challenging one for people to fight against. So that's basically creation in a nutshell. So this should give you some idea of how that side of play works, but it will also give you a sense of how powerfully you start to get stories being told. And that really is the heart of the game. The stories start to bounce off these cards very, very quickly and very easily. And they often relate almost uncannily into each other. That's not, I believe, because the cards are really sort of telling you something about this character. Remember, it's a fictional character. They don't exist. So it's not predicting anything. But it is telling us a lot about our ability to make connections between things, to take things that we see that appear to be just random things and to try and make them have meaning as if they really genuinely connect. And actually, people tend to get very good at that, and the more you do this, the easier you'll find it will become.